This is the first recording about cell specialization, and it's specifically about cells in plants. So cells have very specific functions, and because of that they've adapted their internal and their external structure to help with their function. So when you look at a cell, you don't just see the generic cells that we give you when you're learning what the organelles are. Every specific cell type has its own distinct shape, its own distinct number of organelles that are within it, distinct size with some organelles, because vacuoles can actually be different sizes in different cells. And so overall, the surface structure and the internal structure is different, and that reflects the job that that cell has to do. So here is a picture of a cross-section of a leaf. And in here you can see that there's not just one type of cell in this leaf. There are many different cells, and they all look slightly different. We have these cells up the top here, this thick dark lining across the top, these long cells just underneath, more cells with bits of, this is actually air spaces in here inside the leaf. We have down here these tiny little paired cells here. We're about to learn what they are. And in here we've got this bunch of cells that are grouped together in this circular fashion as well. And these cells all have their own specific functions. When you think of a leaf, it's got to get oxygen out and carbon dioxide in for photosynthesis. It's got to get water in for photosynthesis. It's got to get sunlight in for photosynthesis. And because of that, it's also exposed to high amounts of sunlight and environmental conditions, which means it needs some protection as well. So along here we have a thick waxy cuticle. It's basically a layer of wax that goes along the top of the leaf. These cells along here are called the epidermis. They're essentially the skin of the leaf. Under here we've got what we call parenchyma cells. They're the filler cells. Their basic job is to fill up the gaps and, if need be, photosynthesize. These ones here essentially are called palisade parenchyma cells. Then we have these cells in here. These ones that are in the circular fashion here, these are the vessel cells. They're actually involved in transporting water and nutrients around. And I've already taken you through the epidermal cells, except for these little guys here. These pairs of cells here are called stomata. The pair is called stomata. Each individual cell is called a guard cell. And we're going to go through their structures and the way that they have adapted their structure to suit their function now. Here we have palisade cells. Now, as you can see, they're very long shaped cells. They look like columns. They have lots and lots of chloroplasts around them, as you can see in here. Somewhere in there is nucleus and mitochondria, but they're very hard to see because the predominant feature of these guys is their chloroplasts. Now, if you look at them in real time, you can see that the chloroplasts are moving constantly around the outside, not into the middle layer, and that's because there's actually a large vacuole in the middle there pushing them to the outside. And as they circle around like this, they're actually on the edge of the cell, which has a high surface area, so they can be on the edge, where they capture sunlight, and then the sugar they make goes into the vacuole, which is also a part of that cell. So their structure helps their function, which is to capture sunlight, produce sugar, store sugar, so it can go somewhere else in the plant. Here we have guard cells, and the hole that they create is called a stomata. So they actually look like great big thick lips, and essentially they act like thick lips because they open and close, and they let food, which for the plant is carbon dioxide and water, in through them when they open. And if they want to stop stuff from getting out of the leaf, they actually contract and close up that little hole so gas can't escape. So each one of these little cells is stomata, and if you look up close, it actually has, again, a lot of some chloroplasts, but also mitochondria, because it expends a lot of energy opening and closing. It has a thick wall on it, and of course its shape, the shape of these lip-like structures here, help improve its function. If it was straight and rigid like this column of cells here, it wouldn't be able to contract and close easily. Now the next one I'm going to look at here is our sieve vessel elements. It's these little cells in the middle here, the ones that I said were used for transporting nutrients around the plant. Essentially they're the veins and arteries, if you think of it that way, of the plant. The plant, in this case the leaf, makes sugar, which is actually not a crystallized version of sugar, it's a dissolved version of sugar. And that sugar then has to get out of the leaf and down to the rest of the plant. And it does that by traveling through these long tube-like cells here called phloem. And they're very long, as you can see. And at the end here, you can't see it very well, but what it actually has is at the end of each cell, it has perforations in the end of its cell so that the sugar can pass from one cell into the next, and it acts like a large straw. So these cells are specifically shaped. Now because of this, they're pretty much hollow inside, so they can't exactly help themselves to live. They've lost a lot of their internal organelles to allow for that great big tube to open up. So they have a helper cell here that actually does an awful lot of the work for them with its organelles, and then supplies nutrients and energy and stuff to them for that phloem cell to then survive. So they're very long shape, they have the perforations in them. Now they are also have companion cells called xylem, which are these ones here. Now the xylem actually are what transports water around the plant, not liquid sugar but water. So they're the ones that bring the water up from the roots into the rest of the plant. Now these guys are actually dead cells, completely dead. They grow to their shape, die, lose all their internal structures, and all you have essentially is a cell wall left. But the cell wall they leave is a really, really strong one. It's made out of something called lignin, which is a very, very strong carbohydrate, and it helps the plant to actually stabilize. So a lot of the hard, tough, woody structures that you see are actually the lignified cells of a xylem. And so they go through the plant as well, help give it structure, but they again have perforations in the ends of their walls. They meet perfectly end to end, and they basically create huge giant straws that run through the plant and allow water to be pulled up. Now here is a stone cell, and the name pretty much gives away what their job is. They are like stone. They are cells that are very, very hard, and because of that they're used primarily for protection. Essentially the cell has reduced its internal structure down to a very minimal area here with a few little strands going out. This is the external cell wall here, but in between all this stuff here is actually filled up with a substance called lignin, which is a chemical that's very, very tough. And anyone who's ever bitten into a stone fruit and cracked a tooth knows what it feels like, because stone fruit have these lignified cells around their outside to protect the seed within. Lastly, I think, is root cells. Now these guys, of course, appear in the roots of all plants. Now, although you don't see it here, this is the outside. Let me see if I can draw it. So here we've got a root going down into the soil, if you imagine that this whole area is a root, and the epidermal or skin layer cells of the root have what we call root hairs coming off them. And these specific root cells are used to absorb water and nutrients into the root. Now the root hair essentially increases the surface area of this entire cell, because this is where the water and the nutrients come in. So the bigger the surface area, the increased absorption capabilities the cell has. So these internal cells here in the root don't have the hairs, only the ones that are on the outside of the root, and essentially they have a very large vacuole to allow them to store the water that comes in. They have a nucleus, and of course an increased surface area on one side of the cell so that they can absorb water and nutrients quite quickly.